Here's the bottom line. Values are the foundation of your practice. Now, when they're clear and consistently applied, decision-making becomes easier. Your team becomes more aligned. Your practice grows in a way that actually feels right for you. Now, Kobe Bryant, he had a relentless value of relentless excellence. Now, he didn't just want to win, he wanted to master every aspect of the game. Apple always had and operated with the value of simplicity. Steve Jobs once said, "Simple can be way more difficult than complex." You have to work really hard to get your thinking clean and make it simple. Here's a quick challenge for you. This week, okay, whether it's adjusting your patience, whether it's your team communication as well, take the opportunity to actually bring your values into action. Bring them to life. Where can you show them? Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, folks. Hey, welcome to another episode of the Marketing Your Practice podcast, the podcast where I have the pleasure of simplifying the marketing and the mindset so you, the chiropractor, can increase your income, your impact, and your enjoyment in practice too. Now, so much of business growth comes down to your ability to be able to make really good decisions. But here's the challenge. Most of the decisions that we're making in practice are not black and white, which means there's just not often an obvious right answer. They sit somewhere in the grey. Should you raise your fees? Should you let a team member go? Should you change the way that you communicate your care recommendations? These aren't simple yes or no answers. Now, when faced with these types of grey decisions, many chiropractors understandably become overwhelmed, stuck, or they default to an easy path, the path of least resistance. Now, while this might feel comfortable in the now and the moment, it almost always leads to bigger problems down the track. So how do you make these type of decisions with clarity and confidence? Well, the idea, or the answer rather, lies in having a North Star. And a North Star for most of us is our core values. Now, when your values are really clear, decision-making becomes a whole bunch easier. Not always easy, but it does become easier. You don't have to second guess yourself or feel like you're being pulled in different directions. You simply ask, does this align with my values? And this is exactly what we're going to cover in today's episode. We're going to cover the role that values have in practice and life, and why values matter and how they shape every part of your practice. We'll talk about how to choose your values. I'll take you through a simple process to uncover what truly matters to you, because values are very, very personal. I'll give you my recommendations with regards to how many values you should have, because too many values can dilute your focus and how you find balance as well. We'll go through all of that too. I'll help you identify some of the core signs that might suggest that you're out of alignment, okay? And then finally, we'll talk about living your values in your practice and getting your team on board. So how to embed the values into patient care, team culture, business decisions, daily leadership, all those sorts of things. So by the end of today's episode, you're going to have all the tools that you need to define your values and use them to make clearer, more confident decisions in your practice. So folks, let's dive in. Let's start with this, the role of values in your practice and your life. I mentioned beforehand, values act as a North Star in both personal and professional life. We're going to spend most of today really talking about, professional values, and there can be some difference in your personal values, although they shouldn't contradict. So just know most of today is going to be really talking about values in around our practice as well. So values guide our decision making, they influence behavior, they create consistency in what happens in our practice. Now, without them, we can find ourselves making choices that feel off, okay? Saying yes to things that don't align with our mission, feeling like we're constantly chasing short-term wins rather than building something really meaningful in our practice. So in our chiropractic practice, our values shape the way that we communicate with our patients, the type of care that we recommend, how we market our practice, and the kind of team that we hire and lead, i.e. who stays around and who goes. Now, what's the cost of not having clear values? Howard Schultz, the CEO of Starbucks, in 2008, he returned back to the company for the second time because the company was really, really struggling. They'd expanded too fast. They had way too many actual coffee shops. They focused primarily on profit and expansion, and they lost their core value, which was the experience of quality coffee in a welcoming environment. That's what their value was, okay? So when Shooks went back to the company he refocused them on that original mission. He actually closed stores, right? They had to go back and retrain the baristas and the staff, and they made decisions based around long-term value rather than short-term profit. Now, the results of this, okay, the business actually grew faster and bigger and stronger than ever, okay? Now, when chiropractic practices, lose sight of their values by prioritizing volume over quality care, marketing in a way that feels off, or if they're hiring people that don't align, we risk diluting our brand. We lose trust, and ultimately your practice is going to struggle to grow, okay? So again, when chiropractors don't define their values, they often end up feeling burnt out. They're working in ways that don't align with what they believe in. They struggle to make really difficult decisions and unsure of what the right path is. You end up attracting the wrong type of patients or the wrong type of staff. And there's inconsistencies in your practice as well. This leads to both confusion amongst the patients and the team as well, okay? So how do we go about choosing our values? Now, first of all, understand that values are very, very personal. So I'm not going to tell you what values you should choose, and I'm not even going to share with you all of the values that we have in our practice. You need to actually spend the time and work out what are the values for you, because if your values aren't authentic, they're not going to have the impact that you want them to have, okay? So values shouldn't be just words that sound good. We often hear things like, integrity comes across, or trust. They need to be, and whilst these are great values and they may be ones that you choose, you need to have something that's deeply meaningful to you and practical also, okay? They act as an internal compass, or we talked about before, a North Star as well. So choosing your values, this is going to be a process I'm going to encourage you to go through over the coming weeks, but here's some reflective questions that'll start to point you in the right directions. Like, why did you become a chiropractor? Beyond just helping people, what was the deeper reason? What kind of impact do you want your practice to have, okay? What kind of patients do you love working with? What frustrates you in practice? Actually looking at what frustrates often highlights where your values are being violated. So look across that in other businesses as well. What things frustrates you as well? What do you want your reputation to be in 10 years' time? Now, Kobe Bryant, basketballer Kobe Bryant, probably didn't need to say that. Most of you know who Kobe Bryant is. He had a value of relentless excellence, okay? Now, he didn't just want to win. He wanted to master every aspect of the game. Now, his value, or this value in around discipline, guided everything from his kind of mad 4 a.m. workouts to the way that he obsessed around constant improvement. He didn't just say that he valued hard work. He lived it, okay? Our values have to be things that we live, okay? Your values should drive your action. So for instance, if you say that you value patient education, but you never take the time to explain chiropractic, is that really a value of yours? Okay, this is where we're going to come in and look at some of the contradictions. If you value family health, but your practice focuses only on short-term pain relief, again, are you living this value? Now, a word to think about here when we're choosing our values. Values can be words or they can be sentences, and often I really encourage people to have sentences, okay? Either is okay. The most effective values, though, however, often tend to be actionable and specific. So I want to encourage you to move away from things like integrity and excellence and service and growth. And instead, what you can do is focus on short phrases that provide clarity and give direction. So empower through education instead of just education, or long-term health over quick fixes instead of wellness, or family first instead of just family, or serve first, sell second instead of service. So Nike, for instance, doesn't just have performance and innovation. They have actionable values. So 3 of them are: be a champion for athletes, create the future of sport, and win as a team. So these short phrases and sentences here provide direction as well. They tell us how to act rather than just listing broad concepts. Now, when defining your values, you want to ask, does this tell me how to behave and how to make decisions? That's a really good value if it gives you direction there. Could my team and my patients easily understand and apply this? They're things that you can start to think about. Now, what you want to do is answer those questions that I went through beforehand, and then you want to look for patterns, okay? Reflect through all of that. If you keep on mentioning words like trust and education and family, empowerment, growth, service, these could be strong indicators that these are your values, and then we want to turn them into actionable ones, okay? So Answer those questions that I went through before. Write down 10 words that resonate with you. You can even, if you go online and just do a search for a list of values, then often you'll find a sheet there that'll have 100 or 200 value words there, okay? And you can start to choose those, and then you can start to turn them into, actions as well. The next thing we want to do is we want to test our values in real life situations. So values, again, should be practical. Each value that you've chosen, you could ask a question like this. Would this value help me make a tough decision? So, if you've got a tough decision going on at practice, would this help me make it, okay? Could I explain this value to my team in a way that they'd understand? If you can't, it's too confusing and maybe it's not a real value as well. This is an impactful question to ask. Would I fire or hire someone based on this value? If somebody actually went out of their way to really show this value, would that be enough for you to hire them? And again, if they didn't reflect it or they actually went against it, could this be a reason why somebody got fired? These are good, strong values, okay? Would my patients be able to recognize this value in our practice? And again, if this is a value for you and your practice members couldn't recognize it, that may be one of the reasons why you're not enjoying practice in the way that you ought to be, okay? So again, here's another example. Patagonia, a clothing brand that many of you know, they built their business around a value of environmental sustainability, okay? Now, they once took out an ad on Black Friday that said, don't buy this jacket, okay? What they wanted to do is encourage conscious consumerism as well. They repair old clothes rather than pushing new sales. Their values of environmental sustainability drive every action. So the lesson for us as chiropractors is this. If you value health over quick fixes, are you setting up care plans that reflect that? Do you have the communication systems in place for that? Again, if you value education, are you investing in patient workshops? Are you actively going out of your way to educate not just your practice members, but your community? Your values should show up in your actions. Okay, so let's recap choosing your values. Reflect on what matters most. Answer those questions I went through, okay? Choose short, actionable phrases instead of just vague words. Now, again, not that integrity and trust is a vague word, but can you actually put that into action? Identify themes and recurring words. Really, I want to encourage you, look for frustrations in other businesses as well, and then test your values in real life situations to make sure that they're going to help you guide decisions, because these are our North Stars. Remember, the tricky decisions that help us to grow our practice. Do we hire this person? Do we fire them? Do we raise our fees? Okay, how do we go about onboarding somebody? Our values should guide all of that as well. All right. Next thing, how many values should you have? Okay, now when it comes to values, less is absolutely more. Okay, if you have too many values, they lose their impact. They become really hard to apply to daily decision making. Now, most successful businesses, leaders have somewhere between 3 to 5. I want to encourage closer to 3 than to 5, okay? There's enough to guide decisions, but not so many that they become overwhelming, all right? Too many values is going to create confusion. If you have 10 plus, you need to prioritize them, okay? And one of the ways that you often go through this is you can just lay them out next to each other and say, what is more important to me, trust or integrity? Okay, now obviously we want to have both of these, and just because you have it's not in your top 3 doesn't mean that we don't have this as a guiding kind of North Star, but we want to have our focus in around this. A small set of values is easier to remember, it's easier to communicate, and it's way easier to integrate into your practice. So Apple always had and operated with the value of simplicity. That was one of their core values. In fact, Steve Jobs once said, simple can be way more difficult than complex. You have to work really hard to get your thinking clean and make it simple. So Apple's dedication was to simplicity. Now, this helped them be really intuitive, user-friendly. Their products that really allowed them to kind of change the world as well. So a quick exercise could be this. If you've got a large number of values, what values really and truly define your practice? If you could only keep 3, which ones would you fight for as well? Which values would you use to hire? Again, which values would you use to fire? Which values would be helpful for you to make really tough decisions? Again, bring it down to 3. Focus on 3, 5 max as well. This will help you create a really strong foundation for decision making. This is what we're using it for, decision making as well, okay? Now, the next thing that we need to do is we need to use our values to identify when we're out of alignment, okay? Having values is one thing, living them is another, okay? Many of us have taken the time to clarify our values, and maybe we wrote them down, but they then got put in the cupboard with our systems, our standard operating procedures for our practice, never to be investigated again. The thing that happens is that life drifts in a way that it's easy for us to stop considering our values without even realizing it, okay? When your actions and your decisions and your practice operations drift and don't align with your values, you're going to start to feel friction. There's something in line with us in human beings. We have these core values, and when we act in a way that's out of integrity with them, we get feedback, okay? You're going to start to notice that friction internally as well as external results as well, okay? Things might feel like they're working on the surface, but underneath they'll feel off, okay? So here's some signs that you might be out of line with your values, okay? Decisions will feel difficult and stressful, okay? If every major decision feels overwhelming, it's often because you don't have clear guidelines. Now, this doesn't mean, as I mentioned right back at the beginning, this doesn't mean that things will be easy, but with values, they will be easier, okay? We've had several challenges in practice with Laura and I over the last 18 months with regards to staff, where there hasn't been clear black and white decisions, okay? That making the decisions has been difficult, but we've been able to be guided by our values, so we've been able to sleep at night, okay? You might feel drained or frustrated. If your work is exhausting you beyond the normal that comes from looking after patients and managing a business and leading staff, it may be that you're operating in a way that doesn't match your values or your beliefs. If you're attracting the wrong patients or team members, if you find yourself working with people who don't appreciate your approach, okay, it could be because of your branding, your messaging, and the values aren't being reflected or communicated clearly, okay? If you find yourself compromising just to keep your business going, if you're doing things that don't sit right with you, if you're discounting your services when you believe in premium care, if you're rushing through adjustments when you value thoroughness, you're likely to be out of alignment, okay? You're not in line with your values. If your team is confused about what you stand for, if team members act in ways that don't fit your philosophy, it's a sign your values haven't been clearly defined, communicated, or reinforced, okay? So how do we go about realigning our values? Okay, well, here's some steps that might help you. We need to revisit our core values regularly, okay? So you need to schedule time, at least quarterly, to assess if you're living your values in practice. And I'll talk about it a little bit later on in terms of, we'll get a bit more tactical about this, okay? You want to go through and audit your daily actions. Are your patient interactions? Is your marketing? Are your business decisions reflecting your values? Okay. Look for what's causing friction. If there's friction in practice, go back and look at it. Okay. What specific tasks, patients, or business strategies feel off? And are they misaligned with your core beliefs, your values as well? Now, when we find these, and often we find several, it's not about trying to attack all of them at once, but just start to make small changes, okay? Again, communicate with your team. If your team is out of sync, revisit your values together. Make sure that everybody understands how to apply them. What do they look like in action, okay? When we bring values to our team and our practice, okay, the values shouldn't just be written down in a notebook. They shouldn't just be a poster on your wall. They should shape everything in terms of how your team operates, how patients experience care, and how decisions are made, okay? For this to happen, your team needs to really engage with them, okay? So this brings us on to our next section here where we'll dive into a little deeper, which is living your values in practice and getting your team on board, okay? So as I mentioned before, having values is great, but if they don't show up in your daily actions, they're useless. They're just words. A value-driven practice means that every decision, every interaction, and every business choice reflects what you stand for, okay? So again, we should be using our values to guide patient care, okay? This is a matter of integrity here. Your values should shape how you communicate, what care you recommend, and your interactions with patients. If you're doing one thing with the way that you look after your family and your staff, but you're recommending another thing to other patients there too, there's an incongruency there. It'll break down. If you value education, every patient interaction should reinforce learning from the first visit all the way through, not just in the first visit and the report of findings and front stack it. This is all the way through, okay? If you value long-term health, your care recommendations should reflect that, okay? Or again, do you find yourself prioritizing quick pain relief instead of? If you value trust, does your marketing, is your pricing, are your communications, are they transparent and authentic as well, okay? So again, we need to make sure that we have values in patient care. We need to make sure that our team is engaged for it, okay? So we want to begin hiring based on values. Don't just look at skills. But again, you could ask an interview question that reflects where the candidate aligns with your philosophy. So one of the values that we have in our practice is customer service, okay, going above and beyond. So one of the questions that we ask in our interview process is, can you give me an example in the last 30 days of where you went above and beyond? Now, we see some fabulous things inside of this that really help to guide us with who we will choose. We had a stunning young person recently who just worked in a supermarket that when I asked her this question, she said, I recently had a woman coming in. I noticed that she was struggling in one of the aisles looking through the cake mixes. When I went up to see if she could help, she turned towards me. She had a little tear in her eye. She was looking for a cake mix that she wanted to make. Her mother died last week, and this was the cake mix that her mother made. We didn't have this particular cake mix in place. I took her phone number for her, and when I was on my lunch break there, I rang around to the other stores and I found out where the cake mix was. I called her and I told her where to go. Now, these are all things above and beyond what you would expect from somebody, a young person who is working in a supermarket, but it shows how she lives going above and beyond, okay? We need to be asking these sorts of questions as we go forwards, okay? A great example of this that I really love is the All Blacks rugby team. They have this concept of a no ego rule, okay? And they have a core value to reflect this, which is called sweeping the sheds. So no matter how famous a player is, they all clean the locker rooms after the games, okay? This helps to keep their ego in check, and it reinforces that no one is above the team. Now, a lesson here is this. Your team won't live the values unless they're reinforced often and they're consistently modeling them, okay? We need to see this in action all of the time there as well. We want to use, if we're to be living and implementing these models, we need values. We need to be using them to make business decisions as well, okay? Does our pricing model reflect our values? Does our marketing reflect our values? Do our new hires and our fires reflect what we stand for as well? Does the office environment reflect our values as well? Again, we talked about Patagonia before. Another example for them is that whole concept of, sustainability. They refuse to partner with manufacturers that don't have the same ethical standards that they do, okay? If your values truly matter, they should reflect how you run the business, not just what you say. So every level should be reflected there, okay? So again, keep yourself and your teams accountable with this. Just last point on this as well. With the best of intentions, okay, what happens, I mentioned before, is our values tend to drift. So we want to have regular team meetings, or we're going to come together, quarterly and do a deep dive on our values. On our monthly meetings, we could be having a check-in with this. We could be asking our team, how do we live our values this week? Okay, where are we doing things really great? We could look for patient interactions where did we actually reflect our values? Do our patients experience our values this week as well? Okay, so here's a quick challenge for you as well. This week, okay, whether it's adjusting your patients, whether it's your team communication as well, take the opportunity to actually bring your values into action. Bring them to life. Where can you show them? Okay, if your value is in education, where can you actually go above and beyond with that as well? Okay, so again, values isn't just about something that we talk. We have to make sure that they are being brought into action. Okay, we're using them to attract the right patients. We're using them to build and engage team. We're using them to grow our practice in every possible way. Now, we've covered a lot today, so let's bring it all together. Here's the bottom line. Values are the foundation of your practice. Now, when they're clear and consistently applied, decision-making becomes easier. Your team becomes more aligned. Your practice grows in a way that actually feels right for you. Some key takeaways. Values simplify decision-making. When you're faced with tough choices as well, we want to go back to our values. What does our values tell us to do? Values guide patient care, team culture, business strategy. They should shape everything from pricing to how you educate your patients as well. Living your values daily is ultimately what truly matters, okay? We don't want to go to all this effort to create our values and then put them in a book and shut them away in the cupboard. So here's some next steps for you, okay? Write down your top 3 to 5 values. Keep them short, keep them actionable and specific, okay? i.e., empower through education rather than just education. Identify one area of your practice that is out of alignment. Where is there friction at the moment? Where is a part of your practice where you're having the most friction? Is it in education? Is it in retention? Is it in conversion? Is it with staff, team culture, business decisions? Okay. Now, once you've identified that, take one small action this week. Okay. Reinforce, use your value to drive your actions. Okay. Whether it's with your team, adjusting your patient education, tweaking your marketing. Okay. Just commit to one step that will have you moving towards living your values more fully. A value-driven practice doesn't just attract the right patients, it becomes a business that you're really proud to run. Remember, we want to have a practice that has impact and income and enjoyment. And if you're not running a practice that's aligned with your values, it won't be enjoyable, okay? So what's the one value that you'll focus on this week? Send me a message, either an email or jump on the socials as well, or leave a comment as well. I'd love to hear how you're applying this in your practice. And as always, thanks for listening. Thanks for all that you do and the lives that you continue to save on a daily and a weekly basis. If you found this episode helpful, valuable, please share it with a fellow chiropractor who you know needs to hear it. Keep living your values, keep growing your practice, and I look forward to seeing you back here next week. Thanks, gang. Bye. If you've enjoyed listening to this podcast, you have to come and check out my Community Influencer program. It's my monthly coaching program where we take all this material and I'll work with you to help you apply it, implement it, and systemize it. The Community Influencer Group Coaching Program is designed to help you increase your practice income, impact, and enjoyment. Join me over at anguspyke.com/join. That's anguspyke.com/join. I'd love to see you there.